just slams the front end of the car and kills your momentum. So that's where shifting as perfectly as possible comes into play.
That's why it's fun to watch the in-cars that you and Jake have in there, because you can tell right when it gets to the lights. If you just hear a little dot-dot, it's like, ooh, all right, that was pretty clean.
Exactly.
So the engine, of course, we mentioned earlier, 500 cubic inch V8. It is an iron block, and the blocks and cylinder heads come raw from General Motors. They have to have a part number on them. So those are, believe it or not, you can go to the Chevrolet Performance Catalog, and you can buy yourself a set of raw cylinder heads. You can buy yourself a raw block. The machines, the teams will take that raw cylinder block and remove over 130 pounds of iron from it. So the block they get is the bores in the thing you can barely get your thumbs in. And they do that so the teams can kind of move the bores where they want in the block. And there's, I mean, the KB guys will tell you, you guys will talk about it, there's like up to a week of machine work just in preparing a block.
Absolutely, because you can buy a block for not a lot of money, but once it's machined, there's quite a bit of time and effort and money involved in getting that done. And then as far as cylinder heads go and intake manifolds go, that's kind of the part that's super secret about Pro Stock. And that's why we turned our cars around so the fans can get a more intricate look of what's going on. We still cover our intake manifolds because that's probably over $1 million worth of development that has gone on with different manifolds coming from different manufacturers like Carl Foltz or Hogan, and we'll run them on our dyno before we ever take them to the racetrack. If it doesn't show a horsepower improvement, we don't even bother putting it on here. Having said that, the air going down the racetrack comes in differently than it would on a dyno sitting still. So we take all of that into account, but a lot of money, a lot of time goes into the development of the heads and the intake manifold.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. One of the things you'll notice on every Pro Stock car out here that there is a covering over the intake manifold. And those of you that are longtime NHRA fans remember one of the most famous Pro Stock crashes of all time was Bob Glidden at Atlanta in 1986. Had a horrendous crash. The car rolled over on top of the guardrail, just tore itself to shreds. And Bob Glidden scraped himself out of the car, took his fire jacket off, and threw it over top of the engine so no one could actually see the intake manifold as he was bleeding next to the car. So that is the amount of, and that's still the way that happens here today in terms of making sure that no one really knows what you got going on under that cover, because in a naturally aspirated engine, delivering the air and the fuel is ultimately how you're going to make the most horsepower. If you guys got some questions, we can start fielding some questions for Erica.
Setting of the wheelie bar. Setting of the wheelie bar. How straight and true is the track for that to even make a difference? Because I know like the first 100 feet or so is probably in use, but if there's bumps or whatever, then what difference does it make?
Let's talk about the wheelie bar.
All right, so my crew chiefs, as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, right before I pre-stage, are back there measuring the wheelie bars. So we'll set the right wheelie bar at a predetermined measurement, and the left one is a little bit higher because the only one we really ever hit is the right one, and that kind of just steers the car. So some tracks are flat, other tracks are kind of crowned. So if you get your wheelie bar too low or let it get too high, you'll have a wheelie, it'll get up on the wheelie bar and unload the tire and you'll go into shake. So it's a very fine-tuned setting, but like here, for instance, it's got a little bit of a crown to it in the right lane. So that's something that we take into account. Pomona's another bad one. So it's it just depends on track condition, and our crew chiefs fortunately know that.
Big difference when you leave in the line.
So
Answer honestly. Answer
I have to
honestly.
be honest.
Answer
I
honestly
hope
here.
my guys aren't listening. They call me Warren Johnson because I'm like old school. I like carburetors and I like gauges. I don't like this computer screen crap in my car. But that's how I learned. I learned how to work on carburetors. I learned how to drive with carburetors. The drivability with carburetors was much better than it is with EFI. We had 2 4-barrel carburetors. Now we have one humongous, about this size, throttle body. So the drivability of that, and when I say drivability, like throttle control and the burnout and bringing the RPMs up to stage, very different. My guys have machined some parts that made our throttle much better. It's as close to carburetors as it's ever been since I've driven EFI, but it's a lot different. It was very challenging. You'll hear a lot of people get on the chip in the burnout, and I used to say if you have to have the burnout chip, you probably shouldn't be driving. That is not the case now because it just gets away from you. Like the vacuum that's created with that large butterfly throttle body. Like if you get past a certain point, it gets really zippy. But once you get to that, there's like a hang up. If you get past it, it like goes right to the high side. So you just have to really finesse it. I don't know if that makes sense, but carburetors were my jam.
The guys from the companies that make valve springs will stand at the starting line and scream at people who run them off the rev limiter. No, stop it! Stop it! You're killing our parts. Who has more questions for Erica?
How many times on a typical race weekend will you tear the engine down, or do you have to?
So every run when we get back to the pit area, we'll pull the valve covers. My guys take the clutch completely out of it. The transmission comes apart every single run. The rear end doesn't come out unless the weather changes significantly. But as far as engine maintenance goes, we'll come back, pull the valve covers, we'll run valve lash, check spring pressure. If we have a predetermined spring pressure that if we get below that amount, we'll change valve springs. And with the 10,500 RPM rev limiter, we don't go through as many springs as we used to. We used to come back and change them every run, but now we get 6 to 8 runs out of a set of valve springs, and intake ones are obviously more important than the exhaust. So we'll start race day with a fresh set and hopefully drive it to the winner's circle.
And back for the winner's circle, as is your tradition.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how many people on a race weekend, how many people are touching that race car on a day-to-day basis? How many people are dedicated to that car?
So we have 19 people at Elite Motorsports, but that's my team, Jake Hoffman's team, Alex Laughlin, and Aaron Stanfield. So on my car, Richard Freeman and myself do the engine maintenance. Robert Freeman does my clutch. Chase Freeman does, it's a bunch of Freemans really. He does my transmission and rear end. Jake is our tuner. And then Rick Jones and Mark Ingersoll are my crew chiefs. So 7 people on my car. Bryce Lee packs my parachutes, or Courtney. So 8 if you want to count that. Roughly 8 people. But then you go to Jake's car and he's got 3 guys that, like, we call them the wrecking crew because they run circles around our 8.
Who's got questions?
How do teams feel about the 18 race schedule now and how they're doing it again next year?
How do you feel about the 18 race schedule and that continuing next year?
Well, I know that myself, Greg Anderson, and Jason Lyon weren't exactly fond of it because that's how we make our money. But you have to take into account that most of these teams are run by business owners. 24 weeks on the road is a long time to be away from your business. So I feel like the 18 race schedule has definitely helped with car count. We've had over 20 entries at the last handful of races, more entries than Top Fuel and Funny Cars, so we're pretty proud of that, and I think the 18 race schedule definitely helped that. Having said that, I got to race Pro Mod some this year, so the 6 races that I had to sit out for Pro Stock, I was kept busy with Pro Mod, so I didn't really get to have any extra time off or miss any races, which I'm a hired driver, so I want to race every weekend if I could. I have not driven the mountain motor car. We were actually talking about it at supper last night. We would like to build one, so I'm probably not going to run Pro Mod as much anymore. So if we build an Elite Performance powered mountain motor car, hopefully I get a shot at driving that. Now those clutches are like 10 inches. They're huge, and they take a lot of manpower to hold the clutches.
And Elenco, those are like, you got like tugboat motor in that thing. Yeah, that's cool. That'd be neat to see you over doing the mountain motor stuff.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Erica? Yes, sir. Who's your favorite Pro Stock driver from the history of the class?
I mean, and I'm not saying this because he's my teammate now, but growing up, I was a big Jed Coughlin fan because of what he's capable in not just a Pro Stock car, but any race car. He's probably one of the baddest drivers, and by bad I mean good, that this sport has ever seen. So I'm really fortunate to drive alongside of him. But before I was his teammate, I was a fan, and he helped me a lot when I first started learning to drive Pro Stock.
Fun fact to know and share, Jake Coughlin is the only guy in NHRA history to have national event wins in 7 different categories. So the guy is, as Erica said, he's backed up every inch of what she said.
And I love Bob Glidden too. He was my buddy.
All right, well, we got a question. Yes, sir. Talking about doing more of your own maintenance on the car. You're actually hands-on out there. So let's talk about your role as far as being in the pits and being hands-on with the race car.
I feel like I know like a little bit about a lot and not a lot about a little. So I'm able to work my way around the car. I really enjoy the engine maintenance with my team owner, Richard Freeman. I usually come out and help Chase pull the transmission out, get it inside and bust it apart. He does all the gear changes and whatnot. I pull the tin out of the car, just like stuff to help my guys expedite their process because we're on such quick turnarounds on Sunday. But I do spend a lot of time in the crew chief lounge up there with my guys, just as they make the calls for the race car. And then obviously I go over all of that clutch linkage adjustment with them, getting approval before I make the actual change myself. So I do all of the changing of the clutch linkage, bell crank, and fork.
So one of the things Erica mentioned, and somebody asked, how many times does the engine kind of get torn down or rebuilt? And on a good weekend, never, and the engine stays in the car. But it does happen that stuff breaks. You guys have done an engine swap in, what's the record here?
11 minutes.
11 minutes from beginning to end to swap an engine out of a Pro Stock car is crazy.
It is crazy. That was back in the carburetor days. It's a little more intricate now with all of the wiring for the electronic fuel injection. But I think we can do it now in about 15 to 18 minutes, which is still very quick. But when we come back and we have to tear an engine out of the car under pressure, under time constraints, everybody just jumps in. There's not a whole lot of talking that goes on. We all somehow manage to stay out of each other's way while getting the most work done possible. But at Houston semifinals was when that 11-minute motor swap happened. We changed it, barely made it up there for the final round, ended up winning the race on a hole shot. So that was a really exciting weekend. But you asked about engine maintenance earlier. I said valve lash, spring pressure. I mean, the only other things will really change, maybe a push rod, nose wheel, rocker, but if it's anything deeper than that, we'll just pull it out and put something else in. Like, we don't pull heads off like the fuel guys, not a whole lot, because all of that stuff in Pro Stock is so intricate. It just goes back to the shop to get handled, and we'll just put a fresh piece in.
One last question from me. How many engines do you guys travel with? Now, we're going on a back-to-back stretch here, so in the event you need a spare bullet, how many are floating around here?
I have 3 in the bays and in my trailer, and 1 in the frame rail, so probably 3 to 4 per car, just in case. And then all 4 of our teams, plus Matt, is an engine leasing customer, so we have 5 elite performance-powered Pro Stock cars out here, and we know which engine. That we have different combinations too, so some different engines require different manifolds, so we just have to be careful with where we place things, but we have plenty of ammo for backup.
Very cool. Any more questions? If not, yes sir. Mental changes in driving between Pro Stock and Pro Mod.
So I love Pro Stock because a lot of the weight is on the driver's shoulders. Not that it's not in Pro Mod, but there's a lot more going on in the cockpit. Having said that, the Pro Mod car, I'm like 1,400 horsepower with a clutch, having to shift. Then you go to the Pro Mod car, it's an automatic, about 4,000 horsepower because we have twin turbos on it. So it's a total different beast. I will tell you that when I get in this car, I am confident I can handle anything that's thrown at me. I've been doing it 15 years and probably have 10,000 runs. In that car, I've been doing it a year and a half. It's basically like, I'm pretty sure my face when I let go of the button in that car is like I'm about to get punched in the face, because I have no idea if I'm going to take out the Christmas tree, the guard wall, or set low ET. So it's the goal in that is cut a good light, don't hit anything, and get your parachutes out on time. So it's a very, very, very different process. It is. This is my 2015. Yep. I'm going to try to get one this year.
What kind of training? What kind of training is required to be a good, mechanic, be a good crew person on a Pro Stock car?
So most of the guys in our engine shop, I have a couple of them that went to SAM in Houston. It's a big school down there that teaches you all of that. But a lot of them are self-taught and have been working on them for their entire lives. So like Brian Self, he's great in our engine shop. Jake Hairston, been doing it forever. Worked for NHRA before he worked for Jag Coughlin and now Elite Motorsports. So there's a lot of knowledge in our camp, and I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, so this team is based in Oklahoma. Yeah, so when we go to Dallas, that's about as close to home as we're going to get for you guys.
Yes, we're about 2 hours from the Ennis track to our shop in Oklahoma.
Cool. Well,